Okay, we're continuing through this book, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're doing Charles Dickens, the great English writer of the Victorian age in the 1800s. He lived from 1812 to 1870. And by the way, Charles Dickens is one of the greatest novelists who ever lived. He wrote the best novel ever written, Christmas Carol. I love that book. It's a masterpiece. There's a reason why it makes such great movies, you know. The one with George C. Scott, magnificent. The Bill Murray version of it, Scrooge, is magnificent. The book is real short. You could read it in a weekend. And the other thing is, if you had to look like who is like Charles Dickens, you know, the greatest novelist ever came in the 1800s. Charles Dickens is sort of like is the English from England equivalent of Victor Hugo from France. They both wrote these long masterpiece novels. And I guess the equivalent in Russia would be Fyodor Dostoevsky. The equivalent from Poland would be Henry Sienkiewicz, who wrote Quo Vadis, another just masterpiece. Okay, America really doesn't have anybody comparable to that. Okay. All right, just a couple quick quotes from Charles Dickens. A loving heart is worth more than all the wisdom in the world. Yeah, somebody who's like that is very valuable. I saw that in my mother. My mother wasn't a scholar, but man, she was the best person. She made everything good. She made everybody happy. She always did the right thing. Dickens continues, even great men have bad relatives. If characters and attitudes are different, a marriage cannot be happy. I would actually disagree with that statement in the sense that I think the key to a marriage being happy is that both people want it to work. Because, you know, like I wanted my marriage to work, but my wife didn't. So it just didn't work because she just didn't want it to. But I wanted it to work. I tried to make it work. The dreams we carry within us determine our lives to some extent. I think what's inside a person and how they see themselves and what they want to achieve, that has a big effect on them. Because, you know, you can have two people that have high IQs, you know, let's say in medical school, but whether or not they both make it through is their determination. Whether or not they do anything beyond just, you know, go into private practice and make money depends on their attitude. I always wanted more than just to be a doctor. I wanted to be a great doctor. I wanted to do something great, discover something. So I was more motivated. Okay. Dickens continues, health is more valuable than money because money is earned through health. True wealth is not what we have, but what we become. It's both. Let's see. The Victorian age began in 1837 when Queen Victoria took to the throne. The greatest writer of the Victorian age in England, in terms of the greatest novelist in England, was Charles Dickens. The other guys like Hardy, they're just too depressing, you know. Charles Dickens had a tough childhood. He was rather poor. He was one of 8 children. He was a very good student in school, but he was taken out of school at 10 years of age to go work. His father was thrown in debtor's prison, and that was a pretty miserable experience for the whole family. He had to work in a rat-infested factory putting bootblack polish on shoes. And he had to live away, even though he was very young, he had to live away from his family by himself. So life was tough. His mother was trying to force him to stay working in the factory. He wanted to get out of there and do something interesting with his life. And the experience of being in forced labor and being in poverty and squalor and misery and humiliation really made him a champion of the poor later as a writer. He also got some work, you know, in legal business, and he got to see a lot of courtroom cases, and that also shaped his view of the world. Like most people who go on to later academic and literary success, he was a voracious reader. That's very characteristic of geniuses, is that they spend some time in their youth where they're just alone and they're lonely and they're even quite sad, and they just read constantly. And then they develop this higher verbal skills, literary writing skills that is useful to them their whole lives. As a young teenager, he's working as a law clerk, and he learned how the legal system works and who benefits from it, who suffers from it. And he got a lot of his education on the streets of London and just reading on his own. He'd go to the British Museum of Natural History. He loved the theater and the plays. One really smart thing he did was he married the daughter of a newspaper editor, so then he was already an inside guy to get his work published. That was smart. She worked for a newspaper. His girlfriend, future wife, father, worked for the newspaper, so he would get his novels published in serial form in the newspaper. Christmas Carol, like I said, is just an absolutely magnificent book. And Queen Victoria, she loved to read the books of Charles Dickens. Okay, here's a nice quote. by G.K. Chesterton, who was also a big fan of Dickens. He said, "The beauty and real blessing of the book A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens does not lay in the mechanical plot of it or even in the repentance of Scrooge. It lays in the great happiness that glows through Scrooge and everyone around him. Whether the Christmas visions would or would not convert Scrooge, they convert us." And I would also say, just look around. Christians are the light of the world, okay? You know, winter, it's cold, the days are short, it's cold, dark, and bleak, okay, kind of miserable. But Christmas makes it joyful. Because of Christianity, Christmas is the most joyful holiday of the entire year. And because of Christianity, the couple of months leading up to Christmas, people have all these lights in front of their house, and they're beautiful. They're the light of the world. They bring joy into the world. It's just a fact. That's why I'm a Christian too, because it's superior to all the other religions. Don't give me this multicultural BS and nonsense, these godless religions. They don't create hardly anything in art. Christian art is orders of magnitude, 1,000 times superior to the art of any culture. It's superior. That's one of the reasons why the rich people of the world hate it, because it shows sort of the greatness of mankind, what mankind is capable of doing, all these beautiful works in painting and in sculpture and in literature. It's far superior to all other cultures. There's nothing even close. And that's why, and also Christian ethics are the best. They get everybody to be nice to each other. So anyways, that's worth remembering. So, because all the Christian countries are being destroyed right now, and because the Christians have turned into wimps, all this nonsense, you know, eat your flax, eat your soy, become, you know, be feminized. Give me a break. It's all a bunch of crap, just sort of to gaslight and destroy these countries. So anyways, continuing with Charles Dickens, the scene in Oliver Twist where Oliver asks for more soup, that's also a masterpiece. That's a very good book, Oliver Twist. But I would say his second best book after Christmas Carol would be A Tale of Two Cities, which is all about France and what happened from 1789 to 1794, and what a disaster that was. David Copperfield, by the people who've read it, said it's great. I've been meaning to read David Copperfield, but I must confess I have not read that yet. Great Expectations is his worst novel. That stinks. Great Expectations is his worst book. That's why they force freshmen in high school to read it, because they want them to hate reading. It's absolutely miserable piece of crap book. Okay, Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens actually doesn't have that many great quotes. You know, he kind of reminds me of Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton tells a great story, but he doesn't have that many great quotes. You know, on the other hand, you know, Oscar Wilde's got tons and tons of great quotes, but, you know, his only one novel, you know, The Picture of Dorian Gray, was good, but it wasn't that good. It's full of good quotes, but the plot, the character was kind of weak. Okay, Charles Dickens. The most important thing in life is to stop saying I wish and start saying I will. Happiness is a gift, and the trick is not to expect it, but delight in it when it comes. Okay, then A Tale of Two Cities, you know, the opener, of course, is a classic. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. So you just keep, you know, binary opposition is kind of interesting to our mind. It's how we work. Okay, when you hear things in twos, we think of binary opposition. When we hear things in threes, we think of a list of things that go together. Charles Dickens, he says, "At the time I was at work on the two cities, I read no books but such as had an air of the time in them." Yeah, he would read, like, you know, Carlyle's history of what happened in France, the France disaster. What happened in France from 1789 to 1794 was very similar to what happened in Soviet Russia in 1918, okay? It was an atheistic turnover of a Christian society that was a disaster, okay? And they claim they're going to bring freedom. Yeah, right. What they did was they put, you know, 50,000 heads at the bottom of a you-know-what, Gil you-know-what teen, okay? It was a disaster, okay? And the people were far worse off from it. Whenever you go atheist and godless, you deny the dignity of mankind, the divinity of mankind, and you lower him to being like an animal, and he behaves like an animal, and it's a brutal mess. It's all bad. So don't ever fall for this secular nonsense. It's evil. Okay, one of the classic lines in A Tale of Two Cities, "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done before. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." Charles Dickens, he does have a lot of good quotes, not that many great ones. I like some of these other ones. "A little key will open a heavy door." Annual income, £20. Annual expenditure, £19. Result is happiness. Annual income, £20. Annual expenditure, £21. Result is misery. Okay. Do all the good you can. All right. The best story in the English language is The Prodigal Son. Yeah, that's a masterpiece. And the best song about the Prodigal Son is the one by Keith Green. That's a masterpiece. Anybody who's ever read Christmas Carol will never forget the line, "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim. Okay, "I will honor Christmas in my heart and keep it all the year." That's Scrooge's great line from Christmas Carol. Okay, and then here's like the closing line. There are some great lines in Christmas Carol. Okay, I won't go through all of them, but here's the ending of Christmas Carol. "And Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and he little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter at the outset. And knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins as have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him." So anyways, there's Charles Dickens. Hope that was interesting for you.